We're live. We're live?
I believe so. That's what that little red button says.
We're live. Hi, my name's Dr. John Robinson.
And I'm Dr. Christina Vosh.
That's the second week in a row that you're not sure about your name.
She's definitely John.
She's definitely Dr. Christina Romero Bosch. We're the sex docs. And what are we talking about today?
Poop.
I don't really like
John
that word.
Hates that word.
Yeah, but
Scheitze?
Yeah, you know, the SH blank T.
Coco, that's what our kids call it.
Yes. I don't call it that. So we're going to talk about, you know, are you pooping? There, I said it.
Yes.
Are you going to the bathroom? Are you having a bowel movement, the
Yes.
more medically appropriate term? And how often, and what's going on with that, and how does that affect your health?
Right.
And how maybe that even is related to hormones in some way.
Mm-hmm. And your quality of sex.
And your quality of sex. It always comes back to that.
Especially for me.
You mean about bowel movements or about sex? Or
Both.
about
Those are
yes.
my top two health interests.
Got it. So what we should start off with this?
I think a good way to start is by the definition of constipation. Because this is a really incredible thing. When I first started to practice, I used to ask people, are you constipated? And they would say no. And then I quickly learned that people don't actually know what constipation means. So then I would say, well, how often do you have a bowel movement? Oh, I don't know, 2 to 3 times a week. And I would say, that's constipation. So technically, if you're not having at least one bowel movement a day, that's constipation.
Yeah, at least one.
At least one.
And then sometimes it certainly can be more. And there is some controversy about whether or not, you know, I remember that there's been a lot of talk about that, oh, it should be after every meal, and that's not necessarily true, but I do think evacuation should occur at least once a day, and there's a level of health that's going on with that.
Right, yeah. And the reason that's not necessarily true is more because of the lifestyle that we run, and we probably won't get that much into this, but just like we've talked about sleep hygiene before, I think bowel hygiene is really important. Do you actually give your intestines enough time to chill out and literally empty? A lot of times the answer is no. So we want to make sure that if you are not having proper frequency of bowel movements, that you consider, are you creating some form of lifestyle routine in your day-to-day life that allows you that moment of relaxation to actually eliminate?
Yes. And so what are some of the common reasons why someone might have constipation?
Well, of course, from our perspective, thyroid hormone dysfunction.
Right at the top of the list.
Thyroid hormone dysfunction is always, I shouldn't say always, but it's one of the most common symptoms that we see in a subclinical hypothyroid or slow metabolism or just over hypothyroidism. Stress, poor diet, dehydration.
Number one nutrient, hands down, is deficiency is water. Most people are just simply dehydrated. A lot of times, you know, all we're doing is just telling a patient to drink more water, and that can be life-altering for all kinds of things for your health, but particularly for the motility or the movement in the gut.
Intestines. Yeah. So one of those clinical pearls we like to throw your way is remember about half your weight in ounces per day of water consumption. But keep in mind the quality of the water makes a big difference, especially if you live somewhere here where it's so hot and you're sweating a lot. You want to make sure that you're getting a good amount of electrolytes in your water. A good pinch of sea salt and some lemon go a long way to help get that moisture. Beauty is moisture, to get that moisture into the cells.
Yes. Let me expand on that formula. There's a great book called The Body's Many Cries for Water. And in this particular doctor, and I always slaughter his name, he's Iranian, and Dr. B, let's just call him Batmanjalia or something like that. I can never think of how to pronounce his last name. But The Body's Many Cries for Water. And the formula is half your body weight in ounces, like Christina said, but for every 6 ounces of caffeine or alcohol that you're drinking, not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but if you're drinking those things, for every 6 ounces of caffeine or alcohol, you have to add 8 more ounces on top of your quota. So the number does start to get up there depending on how much you're having. But as far as what are some of the big causes behind constipation, alcohol and particularly caffeine, it starts to dehydrate us, and even though those things can make you go too, right?
True, but not if you're doing all those drive-through ventis that we have people ordering.
Rocket fuel.
And keep in mind that caffeine will also suppress appetite or appropriate hunger signals. So when you think again about, well, this is a multi-layered response. It's not one thing that makes you be constipated. It's a lifestyle situation, because having good, healthy bowel movements is a lifestyle situation. If you're drinking caffeine and not eating enough food, then there's also not enough bulk. Literally, there's not enough bulk in there for your bowels to create that bolus of stool to make it easier to come out.
Yeah, for sure. So what about hormonal issues? Estrogen deficiency, going into menopause. One of the things that many women will notice when they first go into menopause, they'll start talking about, gastro upset in general. Right. So maybe they're not digesting as well, maybe they're constipated, a lot of cramping and bloating that occurs because estrogen has a lot to do with affecting serotonin, which has a lot to do with what's going on with the gut and many other things. But as that estrogen goes away, we start having a little bit more issues that way.
So we've talked about estrogen before. When estrogen starts dropping, how females will notice that they have more belly fat. So imagine if you have belly fat on the outside and more belly fat, maybe visceral, like around the organs, plus you have that intestinal swelling, you really do get that stereotypical apple shape that a lot of peri and postmenopausal females will notice. And this is also really important for those younger women that maybe had surgically induced menopause, like through hysterectomies. Their body ends up looking and feeling a lot older than it should, and just cleaning out your bowels will make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's always one of the first steps. In naturopathic medicine, we say heal the gut and the rest will follow. So one great place to start is that. And that also leads into a lot of issues with autoimmune conditions, and we're also talking about that often. If we can heal the gut, that helps to prevent and even treat a lot of autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's thyroiditis that we've talked about before, lupus disease, etc. Right?
Yeah, when you're thinking of autoimmune, John always makes fun of me because he says my favorite word is inflammation. But it's true, inflammation. If your digestive system is inflamed, if you're having swelling or gas or indigestion or heartburn or just low back discomfort, these can all be signs that you're having bowel movement dis-ease, not just constipation, right? There's other things. But if your intestines are inflamed, you've got to imagine that two things are happening. One of them is you're holding on to toxins, but the other one is that you're not absorbing your nutrients. So you can think again, if you're malnourished, that's definitely going to feed autoimmune conditions.
So what else can we say? So we covered thyroid, we covered sex hormones in general. That would also include testosterone.
So what do we suggest when a person's having constipation?
Well, certainly checking all your hormones. Thyroid is, from a hormonal standpoint, probably one of the biggest ones. Right. So would estrogen in terms of menopause. We want to check some basic dietary things. What's going on? Are you getting enough water, like we just mentioned? Are you getting enough fiber? And there's even some controversy about, do you have to have a tremendous amount of fiber?
And the type of fiber.
And not necessarily have a huge amount of that, but certainly have an array of nutrients. Also getting foods that contain water, so we're back to sort of that fruit and vegetable situation.
And if you're not quite sure what those fruit and vegetables can be, we've also mentioned before doing food sensitivity testing. Now this is a really important point for me, as you know, because I work so much with the gut. If you're bringing this up to your physician, make sure that what you're requesting is IgG, so that's capital I, lowercase g, capital G. That is an immune globulin. So a good way to think of it is like an immune soldier. And we have different branches of our immune military, just like we have the Air Force and the Navy and the Marines. So we have different branches of the immune soldiers as well. And IgG is a delayed response. So it's an immune reaction. You may not know what's bothering you until up to 3 days later.
Well,
so
what branch is the IgG? Is that a particular branch?
Meaning of the military?
Yeah, like what would it be? No? She doesn't want me to ask that question. I think it's like the Marines.
Really? I would think of the Marines as like a first line defense. That would be more of an IGA. We're tangenting.
Oh, that's good.
We're really
so what's the Army?
I don't know, special ops. This is not the point.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
Ask your doctor about IgG, because you can get an IgA or an IgE. You can do both through like a Sonora Quest. Some doctors will do that, but it's not necessarily going to help you figure out what you're eating that's keeping you clogged up.
Here's what the difference is too. People will say, yeah, they did this scratch test. They kind of scratched on my arm.
Right. I went to the allergist.
I went to the allergist and they checked those foods and no, I'm okay.
Right.
Those are a different, let's say maybe those are the Marines. That's the IgE. That's the immediate immune reaction, anaphylaxis, throat closing up, death kind of thing coming on. or a real severe noticeable reaction. But this IgG reaction is something that's a lot more subtle. But when you add up multiple IgG reactions, then that is chronic, that is leading into constipation, that isn't leading into a lot of these gastro upset things. So that's the real big difference. Can you cover, hi Gareth, can you cover high thyroid antibodies? Great point, and that's certainly something we've been talking about a lot about here lately. So let's answer that question. So last weekend, or the weekend before, we went to Portland and we went to an LDN conference, and we were talking about
LDN, low dose naltrexone.
So this really powerful, subtle medication, elegantly subtle medication, but very powerful, helps with these thyroid antibodies, Gareth. And these antibodies are really elevated. That's also an immune reaction, a soldier that's been sort of launched to attack thyroid tissue, and it's autoimmune, and there's many reasons for why it is, and we don't even really know all the reasons. Nonetheless, the soldiers are there attacking the thyroid gland and leading to typically low thyroid function or hypothyroidism. So it's a big problem, and it's the hallmark of autoimmune.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, when we're talking low and high, though, when we're talking about gut health and this question about high or low thyroid function and its antibodies, remember what we mentioned, that if the gut is inflamed, your body is malnourished. It is a very, I'm not going to say that it's a guarantee, but when we are malnourished and we're in a chronic state of inflammation, it is more likely that our immune system will be disturbed. So this talk is a little bit more about general gut health, but we should probably talk about leaky gut at some point. And I think that would even more so explain the relationship between autoimmune conditions, whether it's high or low functioning thyroid, and the immune system and your gut health. But yes, there's definitely a connection there.
And yeah, Gareth, it looks like you've tried it.
LDN, I imagine.
LDN probably is what you're talking about. And, here's what I say too when patients say, well, I've tried Nature-Throid, or I've tried hormones, or I've tried LDN, or whatever it is, the things that we tend to offer. Sometimes it's maybe how it's being done, how it's being given, or in what context it's being given. If it's only given, let's say, in an isolated way, or sometimes we find that we get really good results if we use LDN along with all of the other things that we do, particularly in our Thyrozone system that we encourage checking that book out, and Gareth is saying yes. So it is a comprehension in terms of the medical approach, and that's what we provide at the Hormone Zone and through our Thyrozone system.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great tie back into why we're talking about the gut, because you're not, or one is not a thyroid patient or a migraine patient or an obesity patient. You're a person. You're a person that has this interrelationship, and it's beautiful. The body's so smart. It's so sophisticated. It does everything in its power to keep you alive, even sometimes at the expense of feeling well. So when you're talking about the gut, if that is at the core of proper fuel, imagine the difference between a Hyundai and a Ferrari. They take different amounts of fuel. You all want to be, I imagine you all want to feel like you're some sort of fancy machine out there. We want you to feel that way inside and out. So you've got to treat the gut.
That's where it's a great place to start. And this might even be a good segue too. So how do we bring this all back to sex? How do you bring it all back to sex?
Well, I'm not sure that bringing it back to
Andrea.
sex... Hi, Andrea. I'm not sure that bringing it back to sex here is the art of it, because what I'm going to say is perhaps not so artistic, and it's definitely from the perspective of the penetrated versus the penetrator. Okay, so I'm not sure that I can say that with any more class.
It is very classy.
Thank you. It is incredibly uncomfortable, as anyone who has penetration can report. If you're having inflammation in your digestive system, remember, there's a lot of parts going on inside your abdominal cavity. There's a lot going on, and the intestines and the stomach, your rectum, these are all parts of it, big parts. So if you're having inflammation in that area, it's going to really deplete your libido and your ability to orgasm. So perhaps my artistic recommendation would be explore different positions. This is one of those things. If you suffer from chronic GI distress, gastrointestinal distress, number one, do something about it.
I was going to say, that's where we want to go.
If you're not sure what to do, call us or write us a question and we'll help answer it.
Or drink some water.
Start with drinking some water. Not alcohol. You think that puts you in the mood. Poop, that'll put you in the mood.
Right.
So I would say, number one, do something about it. And number two, in the interim, get fancy. Try something new. Yes?
Yes, that's a good idea. All right, I will take that advice.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Look, here's what we definitely know for sure.
Hormones are sexy.
Apparently pooping is sexy, and even the word poop apparently can be sexy.
Spell is the same, frontward and backward. That's sexy.
I never thought about that. Look, healthy is a lifestyle. We're here for you. We're the Sex Docs, and next week we're going to be talking about...
Why do you always ask me?
I know, because I knew you weren't going to know.
We actually have it written
we have
down.
a list.
He shouldn't ask me. Write comments on that.
We will... Thanks, Gareth. We'll be talking to you next week. Same time, Arizona time, 12:30. We got a great topic. Oh, I know what it is.
I don't. You keep looking at me.
Peptides. Next week.
Yes.
And we've got actually 2 weeks in a row where we're going to be talking about these peptides. And mark my words, we're saying it right now. The Sex Docs are saying it right now.
The hormone
today. The hormone is saying that peptides are going to be the future. They are probably in a lot of ways going to replace, or at the very least enhance, hormone replacement therapy. So we're right at the cutting edge of this science. It's really starting to burgeon. It's been around for a while, but we're really starting to see it on the horizon here, being something really big. So of course we're already riding that wave and bringing it to you. So we'll be talking about peptide therapy and how that can help with your immune system, Gareth, including your thyroid and antibodies. And all kinds of things, growth hormone, all kinds of stuff. So we'll be talking about that next week.
We hope that your fall is as lovely as ours.
Because we're out here today. This is our quarterly meeting that we're having, where we're talking about great things, bringing for you here for the future. And we're at the Marriott, just kind of hanging out, having this meeting. So it's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you next week.
Happy week. Take care.
Bye.